Hey guys, James here and welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to talk about one of the cars that I am most excited to see hitting the streets next year, and that is the 2023 Mazda CX-50. Today we're going to go through all the CX-50 press photos, and I'm going to point out to you some of the things that I'm noticing in the press photos, as well as the specs and the features that Mazda has announced. And along the way, I'll let you guys know what I'm most excited about and what I'm not so sure about when it comes to the CX-50 and what we know about it. Overall though, I think it's going to be an awesome car, and this video is mostly about why I think that's the case. So let's start with this photo right here. This is a really awesome shot of the CX-50, and I think it shows off probably one of the best angles of the CX-50. One of the major distinguishers between the CX-5 and the CX-50 is that the 50 is much more boxy. It's a lot more angular than the CX-5. The CX-5, if you've seen those around on the street, I'm sure you have, they're very rounded in the back, and even the front is a little more swoopy. I love the boxiness of the new CX-50. And moving on to this picture here, it's kind of this very similar angle, but I think this picture really highlights or starts to highlight this roof rack up here much more. This is a very like Subaru-y kind of thing, and one of the big themes that we're seeing with the CX-50 is that there's this whole nature-y kind of vibe to the whole thing, right? It's like very outdoorsy. That's the lifestyle that the CX-50 is sort of responding to, right? The CX-5 doesn't clearly have an outdoorsy vibe. It's just a kind of a small-ish SUV, whereas the CX-50 is very clearly designed to have that vibe. You can see that in these press photos with the roof rack, as well as the black wheel arches and this blacked out trim right here. And of course the boxy shape of the vehicle. During my childhood, in the 90s, America was really, and probably the rest of the Western world as well, was trying to kind of move away from nature. If you think about 90s colors, like think about a Dixie cup, right? With those like teal and whatever, designs on them. Those colors were very unnatural colors. And I think that's very representative of the vibe that was going on in the 90s, where we were trying to move away from nature. Like, look how awesome like this, civilization is, right? What we've been seeing in the last maybe 5 or 10 years is this sort of return to nature. What we're seeing is a lot more respect for the earth and a lot more of this idea of integrating our lives into the outdoors. So that's the trend that I think the CX-50 is trying to, be a part of, and, hence the giant roof rack and the plastic wheel arches. I will say that these wheel arches are way better than the wheel arches on the CX-30. I mean, they actually fit the character of the car a lot better, in my opinion. I know some of you guys like the wheel arches on the CX-30. Reasonable minds can differ. That's the beauty of aesthetics, right? Everybody has a different opinion, but to my eyes, the CX-50 wears its wheel arches much more nicely. All right, let's take a look at this picture here. So in this picture, we can really see how chunky that roof rack is. In the press release, Mazda specifically said that they paid attention to and strengthened that B pillar right here to enable the roof rack to actually carry more weight. Now, to my knowledge, they have not specified how many pounds the roof racks can carry, but it does seem that Mazda is kind of targeting Subaru's target market, and Subaru Outback roof racks tend to have a capacity of about 150 to 176 pounds. So it could be somewhere in that range. And in these first 3 pictures, we see that all of these are photos of a Polymetal Gray CX-50. Now, if you guys haven't seen Polymetal Gray in real life, it doesn't really look like this. Mazda loves to use extremely high contrast, press photos and website photos. So I would say in real life, this thing is going to look a lot more matte. Could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, depending on your taste, right? I think the matte-ish look does make it perhaps look more outdoorsy. This is the new Zircon Sand color that they, are talking about. And I really like this. Now, again, from the press photos, it looks like it's a pretty glossy paint job, but like I just mentioned, Mazda loves to use those high contrast images. So I'm gonna go ahead and guess that the real car's not gonna be quite this, kind of shiny. It's gonna be a little bit more matte, like we've seen from brands like Subaru and Honda. We'll see, but I like the shade of Zircon Sand though. That is a cool color. On top of that, this photo really clearly shows the wheel design that they're highlighting here. And it's a little disappointing to me that both of the vehicles shown in the press photos have the same wheels. I kind of wish that they showed 2 different wheel designs for us to see, but whatever. It is what it is. So in this photo, we can really clearly see the wheel design. It reminds me a lot of like the Bronco wheel design, where it kind of looks like a gear. And of course, this particular car is outfitted with very knobby tires, which that's going to be part of some kind of option or trim level. It's obviously not going to be the base trim level. These kinds of tires would be not so pleasant on the street, or just not as great on the street. So, yep, this is a really cool looking wheel, but I suspect it's going to require some kind of trim option. Also, in this photo, we can really see that set of hood decals, right? And this, I really hope, is just an option and not something that comes with a trim level, because this is something that, you know, so a lot of people like it, but I'm not totally sure if I would love that in real life. It looks a little like look at me, look how outdoorsy I am. I can't even have, you know, a normal hood. I'm not a huge fan of decals and things. I know some people like it, but again, that's why I hope it's an option and not just part of a trim level. Mazda, though, has very few a la carte options. Being a somewhat smaller automaker, Mazda does like to bundle things into trim levels, so that's another thing that we'll see. In this picture, we can also see this little cutout here just behind the instrument cluster. This is for the heads-up display, right? And this is the proper way to do it, where you don't, like, if you go into like a Mini Cooper, there's like a little plexiglass thing that pops up. And also in the previous generation, Mazda 3, for example, there's like a little plexiglass thing that the heads-up display will reflect off of for you to see. Those are super lame implementations of a heads-up display. This is a proper one. It's just like the CX-30, where it reflects directly off of the windshield. And so in order to do that, there's this little tunnel down to a very bright display down there, and it reflects off the windshield and into your eyes. So we're definitely going to get some kind of proper heads-up display there. Okay, and moving on to the next photo. I love this front view of the CX-50. It really shows just how boxy this vehicle is. You know, the CX-5 and the CX-30 are very rounded cars, right? The CX-30 in particular looks almost like just like it's a lifted Mazda 3 hatch, right? And with just slightly more angularity than the 3 hatch. But the CX-50 really takes the angularity to the next level. I love it. And so here we see these big old kind of flared wheel arches. They look fantastic. And then we've got this black surround around the headlights. That's really cool. I mean, Mazda typically has the chrome, but it looks like with certain package or trim levels, you can get the black one here, which gives it that outdoorsy look. Matches the wheel arches a little bit better. And then these mirror caps are also a darker color. I love this front view of the CX-50. It looks phenomenal, in my opinion, and I'm not even exaggerating. I really, really like this. I think this is one of the best looking SUV designs to come out in recent years. I also really like the headlight design. So I'm not a huge fan of overly aggressive or overly angry looking headlights, right? I tend to think that overly angry looking headlights don't age very well because they're just a little too angsty somehow. But one characteristic that does seem to age very well in my observation and in my opinion is a certain level of confidence in the design, right? If the car looks confident in itself, that tends to age well. So I'll give you an example. The E38 and E39 7 Series and 5 Series. Very boxy, very, not angry at all. Nobody would look at those cars, the E38 and E39 BMWs, and say, those look angry. But they look exceptionally confident, right? They have all of these lovely kind of proportions and dimensions so that it has this like slightly muscular, confident feel. I think that with the CX-50, we have just a little bit of the anger or aggression in there, but primarily the stance of the car, the shape, the dimensions, and the headlight shapes convey more confidence than anything to my eyes. And again, everybody can differ on aesthetics, but that's what I pick up from this, and so I think this is going to age really well. And on to the next photo. So this is a real close-up of the hood. Very strange photo, very strange framing, but whatever. Great time to talk about the engine options for the CX-50. We're going to get the 186 or 187 horsepower naturally aspirated 2.5 liter and the 227 horsepower turbo version, which should be able to go up to about 250 horsepower on premium fuel if it's the same as what we've seen in the Mazda 6 and the CX-5. The CX-50 is going to come standard with all-wheel drive, and according to Mazda, it's going to come with slightly chunkier all-wheel drive hardware, and it's going to be a bigger car than the CX-30. So I own the non-turbo, meaning the naturally aspirated 2.5-liter version of the CX-30 with all-wheel drive. And in my opinion, that engine with that transmission, which is the same stuff that's going to go into the CX-50, is just, it's like barely enough for the CX-30. So I'm a little skeptical, I'm a little hesitant to say that that same engine with 187 or 186 horsepower is going to be sufficient for the CX-50. They may have to recalibrate or retune the transmission to behave a little bit differently in order to make this car feel like it has enough get up and go. Mazda has also said that they're going to bring a hybrid version of this car to the market, which I'm really excited about. The reason for that is I think a hybrid version would really, first of all, I think it's going to sell amazingly because gas prices are off the hook these days. in America, certainly I can say that. In California, I can say that it's crazy, right? And so having a hybrid version would be great for fuel economy. It would also, I think it's going to sell well also because, again, there's that whole earthy, like return to the earth, respect the earth kind of vibe about this car, and having a hybrid version would really fit into that. I also think that the CX-50, in the trim levels that are not so like outdoorsy or off-roady, is going to be a fantastic little family SUV. And for that purpose, the hybrid version is going to be I think it's going to sell like hotcakes. I'm really happy Mazda's finally getting into the hybrid game. They are like super behind on the electrification thing, and the MX-30 is kind of a downer. It's super lame, right? 100 miles of range, like what? Like what's going on there? I mean, better late than never, right? And so I'm glad that the CX-50 is going to have a hybrid version. And of course, for the hybrid version, Mazda is going to partner with the best of the best when it comes to hybrids, and that is Toyota. So looking forward to good things coming out of Mazda for the powertrains in this car. I am a little skeptical of the naturally aspirated version, but the turbo version should be great to drive, and the hybrid version, should be really efficient if they are working with Toyota. And now let's talk about the back of this car. In my opinion, the straight on back view of this car also looks really good. It looks quite nice in the same ways that the front looks good, right? You have those big rear haunches. It's kind of boxy in that way. I really like how it has a lot of confidence in its look without too much anger or aggression. I mean, it's a little bit more angry than the front, in my opinion. It's kind of got like this little like eyebrow thing going on right here, but not too much. I think it's really well done. I think this is going to age well. I am a little concerned about these vents right here. I hope that they're real vents because I don't like fake vents. But yeah, hopefully they're real or functional in some way. And then of course we have these two big old exhaust pipes right here, which look fantastic. So I really like this view of the CX-50. It looks really good. And the tires are a good width. They're not super wide. They're not like, luxury SUV kind of wide, but they're wide enough that I think it fits the overall look. This photo, I think, brings up my biggest complaint about the rear end of the CX-50, or just about the CX-50's looks overall. So we see that this line right here is kind of curvy. It's not quite as boxy as the rest of the car. And so I think this is probably the weakest part of the CX-50 design, not because it's rounded, but because it doesn't match the rest of the car. It's a little bit reminiscent of the CX-5 and the CX-30, right? Whereas the rest of the car feels like it has its own kind of identity. This part of the rear hatch area, those corners, the way that they're kind of rounded off, is a little bit strange to me. And then we've got this photo right here, which I think is hilarious. Like half of it's just like this brown mass, which we don't even know what it is. I guess it's a tree, maybe. It's kind of like those Discovery Channel or Planet Earth things where it's like, oh, like we're like, checking out an animal in its wild habitat. We're seeing the CX-50 in its natural home, right? And we don't want to disturb it, so we're kind of like behind this tree trunk. That marketing is hilarious, guys. How it evokes these kinds of things without actually saying it, but it's like, yeah, look how at home the CX-50 is in the wild. Okay, just a few more photos here. This one just highlights just how big the rear haunches are. It's pretty awesome. Look at how much rain it catches, We could end a drought with this kind of rain collection. And then here, same kind of deal. They're highlighting those rear haunches on the Zircon Sand version. Once again, the rear haunches, they really love to show that off, so that's cool. And here we're showing off, wow, look, you could go, mountain climbing or rock climbing with this thing. Very outdoorsy. And here we have a side view, finally, just a side view of the CX-50. I really love this, this side view. It's got, again, that kind of boxy or angular look to it for the most part, with a long front hood. I really like that. I guess this picture, though, does bring up my second complaint about the way this car looks, and this is true of the CX-30 and the Mazda 3 platform, which the CX-50 is based on, which is that the front overhang is quite long. That is one of the awkward proportions of the CX-30 and the Mazda 3 hatch, in my opinion, and that carries over to the CX-50 as well. Although, in my opinion, it's not so bad on the CX-50 because the rest of the car is that much longer, right? This car is longer than the CX-5, so it's considerably bigger than the CX-30. And now, let's take a look at the interior. Okay, in here we have an instrument cluster that's very Mazda. I mean, it's nothing cutting edge. We have some real dials here. We have two circle pods with a real tachometer, a real temperature and fuel gauge set here. And then in the middle we have this screen, which is very similar to the CX-30. But what we do see is that there are more graphics in here. I have kind of long felt that the CX-30 and the Mazda 3 center screen is a little bit half-baked because it just it doesn't really make use of the fact that it's a screen that can display anything, right? It's very kind of limited in what it can display, and that's okay. I mean, Mazda is kind of working up to it, and it does appear that they have more going on in here. In this next photo, we see a couple of different things. We see this infotainment screen, which Mazda has not said, to my knowledge, Mazda has not announced the exact size of this screen. Some articles out there have said that it looks like the 8.8-inch screen that's found in the Mazda 3 and the CX-30. To my eyes, it looks a little bit bigger, and I think it's going to be the same size as the current, I think it's a 10.25, it's just over 10-inch screen in the CX-5. I personally think it'd be very strange if Mazda had a a slightly larger than 10-inch screen in the CX-5, and then had an 8.8-inch screen in the CX-50, which is a larger car and with a more premium interior. So I am not sure, but I think this is probably going to be that 10-inch screen carried over from the updated CX-5. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but it's just a guess, an educated guess. This steering wheel is very much the CX-30 steering wheel as well. This interior is pretty much like CX-30 but made boxier. I love this current generation of Mazda interiors. Why? Because it's simple and it's functional. Right, you look at other cars that have all these crazy buttons and things everywhere. This one, look at the climate control settings. So simple. This is like BMW from 15 years ago. It's so simple, but it has everything you need, right? And then down here, very simple as well, with a real ripoff of BMW's iDrive from back when iDrive was actually more intuitive. Now iDrive is a little bit more cluttered. But again, we're not going to have a touch screen. This is set far back, so it's a little too far to touch, and Mazda does that, and they claim that it's so that your eyes don't have to change their focus so much, right? So that it's a little bit farther away so that your eyes can focus on the screen and then back to the road more readily. Also, I'm personally not expecting that it's going to have wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. The press release does not say that it's wireless, so I'm going to go ahead and presume that it's going to be the same system that we see in the current crop of Mazda cars, which means it's wired CarPlay and Android Auto. One more thing I want to point out about this interior is this lovely color here. Mazda's press release does say that they're coming out with a terracotta interior, which is, I'm assuming is this color, because this looks awfully a lot like terracotta. I hope it looks as good in real life as it does here. And now we have a view of the back seat, very, as expected. This is a premium, not quite a luxury car, so we don't see like a whole bunch of stuff going on with like buttons and gadgets and things. Totally fine. I think that kids have enough screen time these days, so I'm glad we don't see like big old screens hanging off of the back of these front chairs, but that's neither here nor there. In this picture we have Mazda's first big old sunroof, right? Normally they just have the single panel sunroof up here, but now we have a panoramic sunroof that helps out the rear passengers as well. So that's really lovely. Again, moving up market, going squarely into that premium level, which is in my, I would describe it as kind of a half step below luxury. And on to the last picture here. What we have here is a nice little shot of the CX-50 badges. And again, the photographer is hiding behind some tall grass or some leaves so as not to disturb the CX-50 in its natural habitat. But what we see here is very prominently displayed. What is prominently displayed is the all-wheel drive badge. Next year, the CX-30, CX-5, CX-50, and I believe the CX-9 as well are all moving to standard all-wheel drive. So yeah, definitely like a very obvious poke at Subaru here. Mazda's iActive all-wheel drive is really starting to make a name for itself too. I remember there was one particular article, I forget which publication, but the journalists drove the Mazda 3, I believe it was the hatch, all-wheel drive, deep into the snow, and they finally got stuck like miles in, and other vehicles had a really hard time fetching them out because these other vehicles, these rescue vehicles, like couldn't like go into the trail as far as the Mazda 3 did. And that's just the Mazda 3. It's not even that much ground clearance, right? So with this beefed up version of iActive all-wheel drive in the CX-50 with the greater ground clearance, I think this is going to be plenty capable for kind of outdoorsy adventures. Anything short of like real rock crawling or like really heavy duty off-roading, the CX-50 should be able to handle it, no problem. What are my overall thoughts on the CX-50? Well, I think it's going to be a huge winner. We know that the CX-5 is a great seller, and now with the CX-50, this thing, I think looks better than the CX-5. CX-5 is already a good-looking SUV, but this I think looks even better. It has more of that outdoorsiness, which is so trendy these days. It's going to have that hybrid powertrain, which expands its target audience bigger into a bigger range of folks. I can't wait to get my hands on the CX-50. This car is going to be just, I'm really excited for Mazda. Mazda has been taking so many steps that I think are just so right, and I think the CX-50 is a really good one. Thank you guys so much for watching until the end of this video. If you're excited for the CX-50, if you're excited for Mazda more generally, hit the like button. That really helps out Mazda because that'll push out this video to more people and they'll watch it and they'll get excited about the CX-50 like all of us are. And it also helps out my itty bitty little YouTube channel here. This is not my day job. I do this as a labor of love. So, it's super encouraging when you guys hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and it encourages me to keep putting out content that I think will be interesting to you guys. Thanks again for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next video.